If you're creating art in the kitchen, keep in mind this is your canvas, and how you address this canvas can mean a classic or pop art confusion. We're going to talk about plating and presentation today on the Carefree Cook's Code. I'm Chef Todd Moore, and this is the Carefree Cook's Code, every Tuesday live at noon Eastern. Here's our challenge. How can home cooks cook freely with creativity, confidence, and pride while ignoring recipes and still impressing themselves and others with what they cook? Well, the answer is found in becoming empowered with how cooking works, using dependable and repeatable methods of cooking that work for any ingredient, for any diet, and any desire, just like chefs do. And we'll know we've cracked it when everyone sees cooking as an exciting and rewarding way to improve their relationships, their lifestyles, and their health through better food and cooking. This is the Carefree Cook's Code. Welcome back, everyone. It's the Carefree Cook's Code every Tuesday at noon Eastern. It's been the same time for a long time. We're live again, and if it's not Tuesday or if you got confused about the time, please, I tell you all every week, go to webcookingclasses.com/live, and you'll be on my reminder system that goes out 15 minutes before we get together for the Carefree Cook's Code, because we're the Carefree Cooks, right? Say it with me. I create my own recipes. I bring family and friends together. I learn every time I cook. I define my own cooking style. I practice pro methods, and I love my cooking. That's our Carefree Cook's Code, our Carefree Creed, if you will. How is everyone? With me again on a Tuesday. It's actually sunny and getting warmer. The good food is coming. Farmers markets are opening. You're going to have an opportunity to cook some of the best foods. Oh, before I get started, I have a What Am I for you today. There's a kitchen gadget for you. What am I? Tell me in the comments below. What is that item? Have you ever seen it before? Did Grandma have one? Or did you sell yours at a garage sale without knowing what it was? That's the What Am I for this week. Tell me in the comments if you know what that item is. What am I? So what I started to say is all this great food is coming out, right? The farmers markets are opening up soon here on the East Coast in the U.S. We're going to get better and better food, fresher and fresher food. Strawberry season is coming. Blueberry season is coming. It's all very, very exciting. But I get so many questions in our Carefree Cooks community lately about plating, and people are so proud of their cooking, rightfully so. They should be very proud of their cooking because they're doing some amazing things. And I say, oh, I see Chef Todd, I'm so proud because I used Web Cooking Classes lesson week 2 on saute, and I picked chicken, and my deglazing liquid was a broth, and I added some cheese to it, whatever it might be, and I'm so proud. But the plating is disappointing, or I'll work on the plating next time, or I wish I knew more about plating, or, you know, there's all this pride that comes through on so many of these posts because everybody is cooking better. All their foods are cooking better. It's now time that we get all our foods looking better as well. So all those comments that I've seen in the last few weeks about I wish my plating was better, the plating is off, next time I'll work on the plating, didn't have time for the plating. Today, I want to share with you some ideas and aspects of plating and presentation that I've used professionally when I owned my catering company, when I was executive chef at a large hospital. People are ill. A lot of times they don't have, much of an appetite. And if I give them something that looks really nasty, then they're definitely not going to eat and get better. I practiced so much experimentation on plating and presentation, more so when I was a hospital chef than even when I did some of the fanciest weddings. And I want to share some of these ideas with you today. I have a lot to get through, okay? So if you have any questions about it, go ahead and type your questions in the comments section, and I'll get to them. I'll answer them in text later because I know I'm not going to have time to go through all the comments today. So the idea being that, food preparation is actually a lot of science, right? How you put that food together, how you apply heat to food, the 4 effects of heat on food we talk about all the time. But really, plating and presentation is mostly art and expression. That's the idea. I want to make sure I'm still with us live. That's good. Good. It's mostly art and expression, and this is one of the things that makes it so much fun. I always say this is the artsy part of cooking, right? This is the artsy fun part, because good presentation requires a little bit of experience. There's no one way that I can teach you to present your food necessarily and say, that's it. That's what everybody does. There's a one standard to do it. It's art, you know? It requires you to try something and go, I don't think that looks really good. Or ask other people, what do you think? Does that look any good? So you get the experience, but you also do need a little bit of sense of style. And all sense of style means is recognizing what looks good to you and what doesn't look good to you. That's the only person you really have to impress, is what looks good to you, because you're going to have to justify the hours of preparation. You know, if you're putting together a really nice meal, or even just your basic weekday meal, the time that you spent in preparing it is going to be the majority of time. How you present this item just takes the last few minutes and can make all the difference, because ultimately there's a big difference between presentation and plating, and I want to explain that to you. But before we get to the specifics of it all, there are some general rules that apply, and these might not even have to do with the visual aspects of things, because the first rule is hot food on warm plates. Please, this can ruin the most attractive plate. If you put the most beautiful plate together and the diner's like, my food's cold, it doesn't matter what it looks like. And if you're serving salads, cold food on chilled plates. One of the first parts of presentation is correct temperature, and this off the bat is what people ignore immediately. People serve their food on a cold plate or a plate out of the cabinet, and what the plate does is absorb all the heat from the food. So hot food, cold plate means warm plate and lukewarm food. Warm your plates up in the oven ahead of time at 150, 170 degrees. Also, make sure that the food is cooked to the correct doneness. All right, now I'm not even talking about food safety here and sanitation. I mean, if you're going to have a steak, let's see those grill marks. You know, if you're talking about presentation of a chicken breast, let's make it brown. You know, don't just give me a bland piece of chicken that I don't know how it was cooked. This has to do with the caramelization of sugars. This has to do with the visual texture of your items as well. So if you're making like a Szechuan green beans, some of them should be kind of charred and burnt. If you're doing ribs on the grill, yeah, there should be a little bit of black to it. It should be charred. If you're, you know, grilling a piece of fish like a flounder, I don't, or sautéing, I don't think there should be any char on it. So correct doneness. And this is a pet peeve of mine. Correct portion sizes. Okay, I see way too many 9-inch plates with 12 inches worth of food on it. Either get a bigger plate if your family are bigger eaters, but put the appropriate amount of food on a plate, because huge portions to me are unappetizing. Piles of food on a plate are unappetizing. Go make another plate if you want. Get seconds if you want, but a mound of food on a plate. These are some basic rules no matter what you're doing. So let's get to the specific, some fundamentals of plating, because you have to think about the plate like a picture frame. If your art is the food, the plate is the frame. So please get the paint off the frame. How many classic artists do you see paint off the canvas and onto the edge of the frame, you know? Food that's hanging off the edge of the plate. Sauces that are dripped on the edge of the plate. The edge of the plate for a chef is sacrosanct. You do not drip things or have things hanging off it. So keep the paint off the frame and focus it on your canvas. The other thing is, too elaborate can be just as bad as careless. I've seen some pictures in magazines, and I've had some chef friends that put these elaborate spun sugar globes together, and it goes over the food. And, you know, my first response on a lot of it is I chuckle a little bit. I don't want them to see me laugh at their dish, but, you know, too elaborate can be kind of comical, as bad as just careless plating as well. But the first thing that we always want to be concerned about with plating and presentation is balance. That means not too far any one way in any spectrum. Select foods that offer you a variety of contrast and balance on the plate. I'm going to explain that even more. So colors, right? Select vegetables that would add a color interest. So if you already have like white mashed potatoes, now's not the time to pick cauliflower, you know? Maybe your plate needs orange and you should substitute the spinach for a carrot dish, or maybe red pureed peppers would look much better than green beans would on your dish. So think about which vegetable is going to add the color balance and contrast as well. Think about shapes. What if I made you a plate that had meatballs, like roasted new potatoes and Brussels sprouts, you know? They would all like swirl around like marbles on the plate. Round, round, and round is not very interesting to the eye. It's not a good plating procedure. A contrast and a balance of shapes. Same thing with sticks. Fish sticks, French fries, and julienne carrots are just like a pile of hay on a plate. Contrast of shapes. Textures as well. Not everything can be mashed. Not everything can be pureed. What if we talked about mashed potatoes, pureed cauliflower, and then some kind of seafood with a heavy sauce? It seems like I'm on a dysphagia diet, you know, like I'm having trouble chewing. Something should be crunchy. Something should be brown and crispy. Then something else can be mashed and soft. Then a third thing can have like a really natural color to it. It's the contrast of all these things. Like this here, you know, something in a ramekin with a crab cake, and I think that's eggplant with tomato on top. It's kind of round, and round. It looks a little bit like a face, doesn't it? Staring back at you. Or, you know, again, keep things off the rim, right? So this would have been better off done in a moon shape, this caprese salad that I found on the internet. Very pretty, you know, with the tomatoes and the mozzarella cheese, but why have it hanging off the edge of the plate? And I've got another pet peeve on this as well. Blue plates. It's just, you can argue this with me if you want, but there's nothing in nature. There's no food that's blue. Blueberries are either purple or black. Okay, they're not actually blue. Blue is just not a food color. I just would never have blue plates. Blue always seems to contrast with the color of the food. I like white plates. I like plain white canvas plates. That's the idea. All right, we continue. The second thing with the fundamentals of plating is portioning, and this is where I see a problem as well. Portion sizes have got to match the plate. Okay, again, don't put 12 ounces of food on a 9-ounce plate. Secondly, portion sizes have got to be appropriate for the role that the food is playing on the plate, right? Too small a portion can seem confused, or it can be overcrowded. So, you know, the point I'm making is don't put a pound of French fries, you know, all piled up next to your 4-ounce crab cake, because it's going to dwarf that crab cake. So if your plate is too large, then your portions might look skimpy. Matching the size of the plate to the correct portions and matching the portions to each other. A gigantic mound of mashed potatoes next to 3 slices of steak. It's really the steak that's the main player on that plate, not the mashed potatoes. Again, make people come back for seconds if they have to. So a good balance can actually make like the better food look bigger. All right, let me give you an example of this. Sliced filet mignon or sliced steak and a mound of potatoes, mashed potatoes. You can lean, there we go, you can lean the steak up against the pile of mashed potatoes, and it obscures part of the potatoes, making the steak look more prominent and the potatoes look more submissive. I don't know if that's the right word. Potatoes are always submissive to steak. Make sure that the main item is the center of attention on the plate. And again, I've seen this again and again. Somebody pays $30 a pound for beautiful back fin crab meat, and I go to a restaurant and I get a plate of French fries, and oh, what do you know? There's a crab cake under there that's worth $30, you know? Make the main item the attention. If you want to give somebody a ton of French fries with a crab cake, then put them in a cup. Put them in a cone. Wrap them in paper or something like that. Make it one item and not a whole pile of 3. Same thing with pasta. People make this mistake. They have a gigantic mound of pasta that obscures the beautiful veal parmesan or eggplant parmesan or whatever the star of this plate is, you know? Either put them side by side or shingle it, lean it against the pile of pasta, like I said, or put it right on top of the pile of pasta. Make it dominant, you know? Make that thing that you're using dominant. This is a very confusing plate. First of all, it's all off on the rim, right? I've got mush, mush, mush and mush with some bread, it looks like there. It's very confusing. This plate doesn't say anything to me. It doesn't speak to me what is fresh. Where's the contrast? Where's the different types of flavors that I'm going to anticipate, right? Here's a breakfast plate. I think this is one of mine, actually. My round potatoes and my round English muffin, but it is contrasted with strips of bacon and round. There's something I could definitely do better to that breakfast plate. Similar type of thing here with round potatoes, round Brussels sprouts, a round hamburger with a round slice of tomato on it. You get the redundancy of this? The contrast is going to be much better off. And thirdly, how you arrange things on the plate are very important. The meat, again, the main thing, if this is the canvas, you wouldn't put Mona Lisa off into the corner of the canvas and have the whole background be something else, you know? Mona Lisa is up front staring at you, and the main item on your platter should be the one that communicates to the diner the most, the meat being closest to the diner. If you go to a nice restaurant, you might see them bring out the plate, put it down in front of you, and then spin the plate. Watch this if you go to a restaurant. A good waiter, someone who's trained, will spin that plate to make sure that the meat, the main item, is closest to the diner, not a pile of broccoli or Brussels sprouts or something like that. The vegetable and the starch should be subordinate. Now, if you're a vegetarian, there's still a main item there. There's still that portobello, stuffed portobello mushroom or tempeh or, you know, whatever it might be. There are things that are predominant that you want to communicate to the diner, other things that are subordinate to it as well. Again, keep the food off the rim of the plate. That's the frame of your art. Arrange items for the convenience of the diner as well. If there's a sauce for dipping French fries or a steak sauce for the steak, put it right next to the steak or put it on the steak or make sure that you communicate it's for that item. I don't like overcrowded plates, and a lot of people, and tell me in the chat box if this is you, a lot of people don't like their food touching. Right? Do you have, like, I know a lot of people like this. I've served them food, and the first thing they do is move everything away from each other. Now, that's not to say that the whole other side of the spectrum is right either. I showed you the plate with one thing on this corner, one thing on that corner. There should be consistency to it. And again, when we're talking about contrast of shape, contrast of texture, contrast of colors, they can be close to each other, but you don't want them to bleed in between some sort of space. So each item has its own identity on the plate. It isn't bleeding into the other. And a plate is more attractive when it looks like it's a cohesive meal, right? Instead of just unrelated items. And if you really want to see the worst plating ever, if you want to know what not to do, go watch a buffet line. Go to any restaurant or a wedding where people are allowed to plate their own food from the buffet. As a caterer for many years, this is the bane of my existence. I would stand behind the buffet and wince, oh my God, every time as people put unrelated items on top of each other. And one sauce, the sauce for the chicken, they're putting it on the spinach, and it's just terrible. It's like a potluck. You know, at a holiday potluck, that's another way that things are just mishmashed and all thrown together. You want to see bad plating practices, watch people plate their own food. But that's why I'm helping you communicate to your diner, because you're going to plate it up for them. So the fourth thing is, make the garnish count. When you're planning your meals and you really want to make them attractive and you really want the diner to anticipate that, oh my goodness, I'm looking at this plate and I just think it's going to be so great, there's a way to do this with the garnish. And it is not just a sprig of parsley, okay? That's trite. It's passé. You don't just throw a sprig of parsley. That doesn't communicate anything to anyone. Use the garnish, more than just for color, but remember we talked about contrast? Your final garnish is a great opportunity to create the contrast. Contrast of shape, round garnishes. Contrast of texture, crunchy garnishes. Contrast of color, a sauce can be a garnish, or green herbs can be a garnish. You use the garniture as a bridge to balance things that might be kind of out of balance. It doesn't make sense. So if I have two items that are the same color on the plate and I garnish one of them with a green, let's say they're both white, and I garnish with green herb, I've created a contrast. If I have two items that are the same color on the plate, let's say they're both green, and I grate white Parmesan cheese on top of one of them, I've created a contrast. With the garnish, it's a way to save the day. When you look down and you go, oh my goodness, two green things on the plate, the garnish can save your day as a bridge. And so the other way to use garnishes is to identify what's in an item. So if you make orange chicken, garnish the plate with slices of oranges. If you're doing a scallopini, like a lemon dish, garnish with slices of lemon. If you're doing satay, like a peanut coconut satay, garnish with chopped peanuts on top, because then you get a contrast of color and you also get a contrast of texture. It's like, I mean, you know, when you look down on a heap of noodles and you see bits of crunched peanuts, you know your brain is thinking that's going to be crunchy, right? You anticipate it. It's hardwired into you from caveman times, and you can take advantage of this as a great home cook, as a carefree cook. But the other side of this is never garnish with something that is not in the ingredients. This is a really good rule to stick to because you don't want to confuse the diner as well. And I'll tell you what you might come across as people with allergies. So I just told you about garnishing something with peanuts, and you think, oh, Chef Todd, that's a really great idea because they look so crunchy and I love peanuts and I'm going to go throwing peanuts on everything. Well, if there isn't peanut or peanut butter or something in that dish, you know that there are peanut allergies out there. So why ruin it for someone you might be serving with a peanut allergy? You know, you get the idea? If it's not in the dish, don't use it to garnish. Use that garnish to communicate something to your diner. Sauces can be considered a garnish as well. The problem with sauces is they have to complement the item, right? So if you just spent a lot of time getting beautiful grill marks on a steak, and then you dredge it with sauce on top, nobody sees the grill marks. If you got beautiful caramelization of sugars on your chicken breast, and then you put a heavy cheese sauce on it, nobody's gonna see that. Maybe consider plating the sauce first, right? Saucing the plate and then putting the item on top of the sauce. Let the diner cut a piece and it's fun to mop up the sauce, you know, chase it around on the plate with a fork and mop up all the sauce. This is another way to create a difference in texture. Sauce is very creamy. Crunchy sesame seeds on top are crunchy. Caramelization of sugars, brown. Contrast to the white sauce. Different shapes. Now you're humming. You get the idea? You sopping up what I'm putting down? You know, are you getting it? Tell me yes. If you're following what I'm talking about with contrast of color, contrast of texture, contrast. Contrast puts everything in balance. I know that sounds strange, but for a plate to be well balanced, it has to be contrasted. That's the idea. So now we're starting to look better. Like now, here's another plate. This is shrimp and grits. Now, shrimp and grits can be a horrible just mound. It looks like soup, right? But what if I put the sauce down on the plate first, mold the grits in a ramekin or timbale to give them, or it might be rice, but nonetheless, it's shrimp with rice, and then put the shrimp on top. That plate has height. It's got contrast of color. It's got contrast of texture. That is a lot more interesting plate to eat than if I had put the rice first, the shrimp on top of the rice, and then sauced it. It would look like soup, right? Here's another one with a contrast of shape. Here's a stuffed steak roulade with steamed new potatoes and asparagus. The asparagus are garnished with toasted almonds. So I've got round with the potatoes. I've got spears with the asparagus. I've got a round caramelized piece of beef there, oblong, the crunchiness of the nuts, the softness, the white of the potatoes. This is a great plate from a level of balancing all the different shapes, textures, colors, all the things that you can that food gives you and balancing it on one plate. That's a great one. This one is a little bit more of a mess, but I like the color balance. It's seared tuna that's sliced, and this is another way to shingle, like I said, being able to shingle items on top of sauteed mushrooms with green beans as well. Good contrast of color, but the mushrooms are cut into lengths and the string beans are obviously long, so that's where I would take 10 points off that plate for having two things cut like into a julienne. Another trend in plating is height. Is making things higher, so contrast of height. So now we have contrast of color, contrast of texture, contrast of height is what we're adding to it. All these things go into making your plating even better. If you're going to serve rack of lamb or bone something, you can lay them down on the plate so that it's flat, or this way of Frenching the bones and having them stand up together gives height to your dish as well. That makes it interesting, makes it really exciting. If you're serving shrimp, you can serve them in a pile, or you can stand them all up like little soldiers. This is a shrimp and rice or a shrimp and grits dish with a lot of contrast of color, contrast of texture, Parmesan cheese grated all over the place, and all the shrimp stood up on end. And that's the basic idea. So here's some of the last ideas I've got for you. The presentation and garnishing ideas. If you do things like polenta, if you make a sheet polenta or rice and then put it on a sheet pan, dry it a little further in the oven, and you can cut it into shapes with cookie cutters. You can cut diamond shapes. You can use a biscuit cutter to use rounds. You can use Christmas cookie cutters to make grits or polenta shaped in the shape of Santa Claus. You know, it makes things a lot more interesting than just a scoop or an ice cream scoop of some of your grains and pastas. You can mold vegetables also and starches. I've crammed a whole bunch of broccoli into a ramekin cup before, turned it over, and even though they're florets of broccoli, they still stay in that shape. Your potatoes can be molded, beans can be molded, any of your starches can be molded and put into shapes as well. Take invert ramekins or a timbal, something like this. You can go to your restaurant supply store and get these metal rounds, put them on a plate, fill all the food that you want, and then pull the round away, and you get this really nice presentation. Lastly, if you're doing dessert, think about dusting the plate, dusting plate ideas. So you use powdered sugar or powdered cocoa, and you can put a stencil down or something as simple as this, put a spoon down, stencil the plate, and it makes a great presentation for desserts as well. You can add height to your plates with herb sprigs, and the very last thing I've got for you, mark this time in the video, we're almost at the end, because I want to teach you about hip and mas. Hip and mas is so much fun, and it makes so much great garnishing for you. Basically what it is a sugar cookie batter, a really thin sugar cookie batter, and you pipe it into shapes and bake it. So this is an idea of hip and mas. If I made this hip and mas, and I usually put it in a squeeze bottle, and on parchment paper, make a bunch of lines, make lines going the other way, bake it in the oven, you can take it out when it's warm and lay it over a spoon or something, and it'll drip into shapes and things like that. So here is the formula for hip and mas. I'll post it in the comments again, but if you take 2 ounces of egg whites, 1 ounce of flour, and 3/4 ounces of heavy cream. Whip that up, get as much air into it as you can with a whisk, put it into a squeeze bottle, something with a thin tip. You can write your name with it. Kids love to write their names. You can make musical symbols. You can make circles and arrows with it. Imagine if you plated something with a hip and mas arrow sticking into it, like eat here first, you know? So I'll post that in the comments toward the end as well, but hip and mas is one of the coolest things to play with that can add texture contrast, color contrast, shape contrast, height contrast. It's a lot of fun. In fancy restaurants, the pastry chef does that. 2 ounces of egg whites, 1 ounce of flour, 3/4 of an ounce of heavy cream, mix it up, put it into a squeeze bottle on parchment or heavily buttered pan, bake it off at a high temperature, 420 degrees Fahrenheit, and it'll cook pretty quickly within 5 minutes or so. That's the entire idea. So now you can start putting plates together like this. This, my chef, Greg Razor, rest his soul, this was his tuna and tenderloin Napoleon. So it's a sprig of thyme shoved through a seared tuna steak and a beef tenderloin steak. In between is mashed sweet potatoes and pureed cauliflower. It is a cranberry demi-glace sauce with steamed asparagus on the side. One of the most beautiful plates I've ever seen, and that's why you see it a lot pictured in web cooking classes. So go forward. Think about this food that you are cooking so much better now. You're doing such a great job in using your cooking methods, in using a repeatable method over and over again and changing the ingredients so you create this endless variety of original dishes. Now, how are you going to make it look better? What are you going to communicate to your diner that lets them know that something spicy is coming, or something sweet is coming, or something crunchy is coming, or just an excitement of the balance and contrast of all the things that you've put on your plate is coming? Start thinking about how you're going to communicate through your plate, through your canvas, right? This is your empty canvas. Through your canvas, how you're communicating with your diners. Hey, it's time for the dish of the week. And of course, since we're talking about plating and presentation this week, I went through our Carefree Cooks community to try and find some of the best plating and presentation that I had seen. And the first one came from Peter. Peter says, today I cooked a perfectly cooked moist salmon and broccolini. He did it in a white wine lemon butter sauce. Oh my goodness. Wasn't overly crazy about the sauce, he says, but this is one of the great things about being a carefree cook. Repeat the method, but change the ingredients. You actually learn every time you cook. But his wife loved the sauce, so I guess he will be making again. She says, if I continue to cook like this, we'll never go out for dinner again. Nice plating. I love the way the broccolini is all, you know, like fingers going out one way. The salmon is kind of on the edge of the plate to let that kind of artistic thing take place. Bob was saying that he had a truly carefree night in the kitchen. He had some chicken breast left over in the fridge, pulled that out, pulled some veggies that he had out, decided to steam broccoli and sugar snap peas, made a cheese sauce, made his own roux, bada bing, bada boom. Yeah, he makes it sound so easy now. That's the thing. When carefree cooks come into our community, they sound so scared at first. How will I ever cook without a recipe? How will I ever do it? And then they wind up like Bob. Oh, I just made a roux, then I made a compound butter, then I did tomato concasse, and then they're just throwing these words around. So he said he was a little more braver than usual, and he got it done. And here's, you know, Bob's photography is beautiful also, but there's those orange slices. They add a lot of great contrast of color, contrast of texture. But my question would be, I hope there's some orange flavor in that chicken as well. Otherwise, you're kind of confusing people. Sam's our resident artist. Oh my goodness, the plates that Sam puts together. This guy's got some creativity boiling inside. His minister at his church was leaving, so he and his wife, Linda, they decided to host a special dinner for him. Sam is a carefree cook. I remember when Sam started, he was not doing the things that he's doing now. So he decided to volunteer to cook for 16 people. Bring 2 tables of 8 to his house. Isn't that unbelievable? This beautiful presentation, because they were vegetarians, is a tower of kale-infused quinoa, topped with a medley of roasted purple, orange, and green cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, sweet potatoes, red onion, garnished with lemon tahini sauce, microgreens, and edible flowers. You know, just to say all that, there is so much effort and so much love and appreciation that went into this dish. To just throw it on the plate randomly would be an insult. But luckily, Sam gave us this helicopter overhead view to show us how beautiful this plate is. Really amazing presentation. Ed put together, you know, it shows you don't have to do things elaborate. You don't have to have 50 ingredients to have a really nice plate. Ed did some pan-seared pork chops with garlic mashed potatoes and crispy Brussels sprouts. What could be more of a comfort food meal, but yet off the rim of the plate, arranged really nicely, contrast of texture. His Brussels sprouts are crispy and browned, you know, to contrast with the mashed potatoes. Nicely done. Don, this is a really creative plate as well. Don did a pecan-crusted salmon, and notice how, he's taking advantage of the main item being the salmon, so the main item is in the middle of the plate. He's got his rice, he's got his asparagus like rays of sun. I think that's really, really cool. So some examples of how you can get creative. Now that your food cooks better, we need to get it to look better as well and get you thinking a little bit more about your plating and presentation. We talked about the what am I today, and this was a throwback to last week because those of you that said it's a food mill was right. This is, we talked last week, we talked about old school versus new school, right? Well, if you're old school, you have a food mill, or you did have a food mill at some point. Basically, the idea is you put food in there and you turn the crank and it pushes it through the little holes in the bottom. It was a food processor before we had food processors. If you know someone, by the way, that needs to improve their plate presentation a little bit, you should like and share this video with them because it's a wealth of information to getting your plates to look better. So like it, give me a thumbs up, hearts, all those things you do, because I appreciate your encouragement. Makes me just want to come back again next Tuesday and do it again. And we're going to continue our journey toward true carefree cooking. And the only guidebook to get you there is my free, immediately downloadable guidebook, The 5 Forks to Carefree Cooking. It will help guide you as you make a decision at each fork you come to in the road to becoming a carefree cook. Thanks so much for being with me this week, everyone. We'll see you next Tuesday, noon on the East. And this is Chef Todd Moore reminding you that somewhere back in there, you'll discover that there's a method to your cooking success. We'll see you next